I'm Bobby Hughes, the Executive Director for the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. And today we're at the location of the Nanticoke Creek headwaters above the coal measures here in the Wyoming Valley. And we're going to show you some features that are on the landscape that we typically will find on surface maps or of historic mine maps, and also the underground mine maps that our organization has been doing a lot of work for the state and the Commonwealth of PA to get them into a mine map inventory that's being served up on a server at Penn State called the Mine Map Atlas. And today we're going to go around to several sites throughout the valley here in the southern part of the Wyoming Valley and look at areas along Nanticoke Creek that will relate back to some of the mine maps that we're going to take a look at later today, and also tell you about the different types of tasks that have to be completed by staff to understand better how the water is being lost, how much water is going into the mines, locations where stream restoration projects will need to occur to restore clean water to the surface, and also some of the impacts downstream that the underground mine pools are having on the Nanticoke Creek in particular here today that we're looking at to show the type of restoration efforts that need to be put in place to restore our watersheds. And looking here at this location, we just wanted to show you an old structure here that is a flume, a concrete flume that's located above the headwaters and in the headwaters of Nanticoke Creek before the mining has occurred. So we're right now in an area along the mountain here that mining is below us, not above us. A lot of the rock and geology up here is a lot of glacial material, a lot of sandstone rocks that is just above the coal measures. And from here downstream, we're going to see that this clean water is eventually going to be lost to the underground mines. And one of the structures here that's in place is an old U.S. geological gauging station that used to be maintained by the United States Geological Survey, but we've retrofitted it with a pressure transducer with the Earth Conservancy to monitor the change in the height and flow of the water coming down through this location, so that we can kind of calibrate it and then take it and put those numbers into another file that will give us the stream flow coming through this section of the creek, so that we know how much water is being lost to the underground mines as we get a little bit further downstream. So we're going to be showing you some different locations and features in the stream that will take us to locations where we may have water, and then we're not going to have water. And then even further downstream, because of the water going into the mines, we're going to end up with mine water that needs to be treated at some point, and that'll be at the Askam location further downstream in the Nanticoke Creek watershed. We are just a little bit further downstream on the Nanticoke Creek right now from where we were, where the flume was, and we're in a location that's behind me here where you can see the bottom rock that was the entry to an old slope area that went into the underground mines in this location. So where the water is flowing right now in Nanticoke Creek is not where its original stream channel was historically, and the mine maps that we will be taking a look at a little bit later show you that. There's a location here that behind me, there's two bolts that are in the sort of bedrock here that were probably a part of the pulley system and some other mechanisms that were used at the slope entry. And so what we have here is a water going down the bedrock and forming a pool right at the base of this particular section of the creek. And within 50 feet downstream, we've lost the majority of the entire watershed's upper drainage, because this water is now going into that old slope entry. So this is one of the points that will be significantly causing a problem for future impairment in the watershed from mine drainage, because now we have all the stream water being lost into the old slope entry, becoming a part of what we call the mine pool complex in the portions of Nanticoke Creek downstream. So there's a significant water loss at this point. And so that area upstream that we looked at, where their pressure transducer was taking measurements for us to know what the flow was upstream, well, then we will monitor places downstream, and we can go to locations next that will show us that we have absolutely no water in the stream in this section of the main stem of Nanticoke Creek. And a lot of the efforts of groups like the Earth Conservancy and ourselves and the Conservation District here in Luzerne County and many other partners with various sources of funding are coming to the table, including the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Bureau for the state, the Federal Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation and Enforcement, US EPA, Department of Interior, the Brownfields program. There's just a host of programs that are out there that bring funding to this region that are now able to do some of the infrastructure improvements and restoration of the stream. So here is one of our first lost points into the underground mines, and we wanted to show that as well. So now we're at the location of the upstream end of the Nanticoke Creek in the Truesdale colliery on an abandoned mine lands property that's well over a few hundred acres that the Earth Conservancy has received nearly $17.5 million to do some restoration work on a 1,500-foot linear section of stream that has to come through the location where there's a cone bank that's sort of separating the remainder of the downstream channel. And the only thing in this location is a culvert pipe that is probably 24 inches in diameter that is raised so high that water is not going to be able to pass through it at this point. And areas on the downstream side are really just receiving runoff from the top of the cone bank on either side, and they're filling in the locations down below that are going to be a part of the restoration effort. On the upstream side is where there is no flow right now that we've shown on the headwaters of Nanticoke Creek, and any stormwater that flows down through this area kind of gets ponded in the sort of meadow-like area and wetlands down below that doesn't make it through the cone bank unless it literally seeps through the toe of the bank and reaches the other side. But I'm not sure that that really happens. Most of it's stormwater coming off the top of the surface that erodes the stream downstream, and it also erodes the bank that hasn't been reclaimed and causes erosion gullies. That is allowing a lot of the sediment and rock to fill the downstream area of the stream. So the effort that's going to take place in this location is a complete removal of this waste coal material that's going to end up being put into other areas on site for reclamation of stripping pits and just gradation of different areas of the land that will be backfilled, seeded and mulched, and grass growing until the restoration of the channel is completely opened up to allow that clean water we saw in the headwaters be able to move downstream towards the Front Street section of Nanticoke Creek, which will then combine with another tributary that they'll be restoring called Looters Creek that also at this point isn't flowing. So the emphasis in this location here is to remove this. It looks to be about 60 to 80 feet vertically from where we're standing down to the original stream channel elevation that will need to be removed and tapered back, and a stream channel restoration will be put in place and sort of reclaimed, very similar to what we'll see at the next site on SB Run, where the stream restoration has occurred and the water has been restored to the surface from the Hanover Reservoir down to SB Run, another tributary to Nanticoke Creek that comes in well below the Askam treatment system, which we will go to after visiting the SB Run site. All right, so as we continue to move further down in the watershed along Nanticoke Creek, we've come to another location here along Front Street in Hanover Township, just outside of Warrior Run, where we're at an impediment and a passageway for the creek to come through, an abandoned railroad grade here. Actually, there's a beautiful old Keystone arch here, and then I'm sitting on another bridge here that Nanticoke Creek would normally have flown underneath this area to reach further areas downstream. But as you can see here, the channel, even under the Keystone Arch, is still bone dry, and it's still needs the restoration up on top where we just were to carry that water on the surface further downstream. And in some of the mapping efforts that will be shown, you're going to see a sort of red light, yellow light, green light coloration to a number of the mine maps and the mine veins that the EPCAMR staff and Mike Hewitt in particular, our program manager, has put together for Earth Conservancy and for us to be able to evaluate sections of the stream below us where it's been lost to the underground mines, and which veins are closest to the surface, are a little bit deeper, and then those that are even really deep that you may not have to worry about in terms of where the water is, but the flow loss itself and how deep that water is filling up the underground mines and coming out at the Askam borehole further downstream that we'll take a look at a little bit later is really what we're evaluating here, so that we can see what efforts need to be put into place to restore the channel to the surface. And as we keep coming down through these areas that are dry, we want to try and understand what coal veins were mined out, or the rooms and the pillars that were robbed in those upper veins, that we can then look to see what is going to be needed for the stream channel restoration to occur to continue to carry Nanticoke Creek down to this particular street location, and then over to Clark's Cross and eventually Dundee Road above the Askam borehole. Okay, so here we are. We've just moved downstream from the other area that we were just previously at in the Truesdale colliery, abandoned mine lands that's going to be reclaimed to have the Nanticoke Creek restored along its main stem. We are in a tributary a little bit further south now in what was called the Bliss Colliery, which was another coal breaker and grounds here that had been previously mined historically here in the anthracite region outside of Nanticoke and Newport Township. And in this location we're at, it's called the SB Run tributary. And the SB Run tributary behind me started at the Hanover Reservoir up on top of the mountain, which is clean water that comes down the mountain along the flanks of the valley and intercepted by a number of strip-in pits that we're actually standing in one of them right now that has been reclaimed. So what has happened here in the SB Run watershed, after looking at the mine maps, we were able to determine where the location was that a lot of the water loss had been going into the strip-in pits and going into the underground mine workings and surfacing at the Askam borehole as a part of the underground mine pool complex. So Earth Conservancy came in here with several funding sources through various programs to restore the stream and to reclaim the strip-in pit in this area. And so to my left here, you could see the channel, a rock line channel coming down off the mountain that has some clay liner in it that's keeping the water on the surface, and the clean water is now meandering its way down through the valley back into the city of Nanticoke in this particular area. And all these white tubes that you see and wooden stakes are trees that have been planted in this area in about a 20 to 40 foot, it looks like about a 40-foot swath of land on either side of the stream as a riparian zone restoration, which literally means just plant some trees. So over the next 40 years or so, these trees will come up and they'll continue to shade this water, keep it cold. And if there were any fish and aquatic life, which there have been, I've just seen some frogs as I came up on the creek a few minutes ago, that will allow that water to remain cold. If any fishery and aquatic life is going to be maintained in here or come back to this section of stream, that's going to happen because we've got it shaded. The water is going to be cooler, and it'll be a nice sort of ecological system for the stream and the fish and the bugs that are here. We're down at the Nanticoke Creek where the big mine discharge that comes into the lower reaches of the stream are now surfacing at what's called the Askam borehole. And we're on Earth Conservancy property where they've been able to treat a portion of the water that's coming up out of the mines in this location that, from what you saw before, with all of the clean water going in at the headwaters of Nanticoke Creek through the sections of the stream that were bone dry because that water was going down into the underground mine workings and the other veins that had been mined out, we are now at the very sort of bottom of the valley where that water has filled up underground and is starting now to resurface. And when it resurfaces out of these boreholes that were intentionally drilled to relieve the pressure of the mines and the mine water on many of the homes that were around this area that would have flooded if there wasn't pressure taken off of the amount of water that was beginning to come to the surface here in this location, that the boreholes were a way to relieve that pressure and have the mine water, regrettably pollute the streams from this point down. So we have a lot of iron-laden water here in Nanticoke Creek right now that is being partially treated by a maelstrom oxidizer treatment system, which is one of the technologies that we can use to aerate the water coming out of the mines and allow metals like iron, which is mostly the contaminant that we see here, be captured as it drops out into the pollution treatment system ponds that are located here along Dundee Road in Hanover Township. So what we've done was continue to map out the mining for the rest of the stream for the restoration project to occur all the way down to this location. So eventually, with the stream restoration that's going to go on by the Earth Conservancy, with us hopefully assisting them in monitoring in many different locations along the stretch of the creek, we're going to start seeing a lot more of that water be restored to the surface in Nanticoke Creek. And as that comes down through here, our hopes is that it will reduce the amount of water underground coming out of this borehole that we would then have to treat for the pollution of the metals that are coming out. So if that happens, you'll have a lot more clean water coming down Nanticoke Creek on the surface and less water, maybe with a higher sort of pollution load of metals, but to be able to drop that out in a smaller treatment area, that would be the goal. So in doing that, the efforts that we're putting forth with EPCAMR and the staff to map these mines on the surface and the underground is not only going to help the groups like the Earth Conservancy, it's going to help out the state. It helps out residents where they can get mine subsidence insurance, and it also allows any businesses and industries that might want to be located on some of the former mine lands that are being reclaimed, take a look at those maps, work with us so that when they want to put down a pad or their footers and foundations for their buildings, they at least know what they're getting into, and they'll do some due diligence with their geologists and professional engineers to take a much closer look at the underground mine maps in this region, and we want to be a resource to them. So that's the whole effort and why we're trying to put together this video and to educate folks about, as above is not what's below. As above, so below is not the case here in the anthracite region. And we want to show people that water on the surface is usually not flowing in the same pathways underground, but it's a very complex and intricate system in the coal region here that we have to take a look at these surface and underground mine maps if we're going to restore these streams properly.